The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Rob Deininger, and I'm here with Jack Degraw. And as always, we're talking Yankees baseball. How you doing, Jack?
Good. How are you tonight, Robert?
Not too bad. Yankees dropped their first game of a 4-game series against the Angels last night, and it dropped them to 40-38 on the season, and they find themselves 7.5 games back of Boston and in fourth place in the American League East.
Yeah, I mean, things were looking up when, they were going into Boston, and they had picked up 3 or 4 games, and then they just went into Boston, and they just played bad, and, last night, another bad loss. So it just seems like, you are what your record are, and they're 40-38, and that's where they should be.
Yeah, and they dropped to 0-5 versus Boston on the year, and against the American League East, they're 17-23, and they got to do a little bit better than that in their own division if they want to compete for it.
Yeah, I think against the Rays and the Red Sox, they're 5-14.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to get it done. And we were talking off air, and the Yankees left a lot of runners on base in the Boston series. I think one game they left 20 runners on base.
Yeah, it was something like 57, 58 runners in 3 games. And, I mean, they've always seemed to leave a lot of men on base, but they had enough hitters who would hit home runs and knock in runs. But this year, I mean, they can't buy a clutch hit.
No, I mean, on the season, they're batting .219 with runners in scoring position, which is, I think, 29th in baseball. And with runners in scoring position with 2 out, they're batting .205. So, I mean, I think their biggest problem is they're not hitting with runners in scoring position, and they're not hitting home runs.
No, I mean, they have men on base all the time, but they just never deliver.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these guys they were counting on, it just went backwards. I mean, looked like some of these guys were star players, and now, they're way below average. Yeah,
I mean, we're used to seeing DJ LeMahieu bat well over 300, and this year he's struggled to get it going. He's batting .273 on the year now, but he's a guy that you always count on at the top of the lineup, and it just seems through 1 through 9, they don't have a guy that can get in those clutch runs or that clutch hit when they need it.
No, and I think maybe the pitchers have changed their approach. They don't give the Yankees as many fastballs to hit.
Yeah,
and they're just not. They're just not doing the job. I mean, as we keep saying every week, a lot of these guys they were counting on has just went backwards. They're just not good baseball players the first half of the season.
No, and apparently they're using a different ball this year. I guess they deadened the ball a little bit. I mean, I wonder if that's, been part of the problem too, is the change in the baseball. But I mean, other teams seem to be hitting. The Yankees just seem to struggle greatly with runners in scoring position, but that's been their problem the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, they like guys like Torres and Sanchez and Frazier. I mean, they counted on them this year big time, and they just, they've went backwards. And they've declined quite a bit. They look like star players. I mean, especially Torres and Sanchez, and it's just it's not pretty to watch.
And I think you're right. The pitchers have adjusted to them because. You don't see them getting on a lot of fastballs like they used to. I mean, Sanchez has shown you when you try to throw him a fastball inside, he's been hitting them out. But Gleyber, you don't see him getting a lot of fastballs. And Frazier, I've noticed they've been throwing him a lot of off-speed stuff down and away, and he chases. And it just seems like they're up there looking for a good pitch, and they're out in front and guessing wrong on a lot of pitches.
Yeah, I mean, Sanchez last year was missing a lot of those high fastballs. This year he seemed to be able to connect on some, and he's hit some home runs. But Torres' swing is just all messed up.
Yeah,
he's uppercut the ball, and he's popping up a lot, and it's just and Frazier's just lost.
Yeah. Frazier, that's I just been surprised because I really thought he'd be a guy that would contribute this year, and he's struggling. He basically lost his job in left field to Miguel Andujar.
Yeah, I thought you could pencil him in for 25 homers and 90, 100 RBIs, and I don't know. He just doesn't even look like the same player he was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and Torres, he was batting over 270 about 3 weeks ago, but since then he just looks awful at the plate. Like I don't know if he's trying to hit home runs or if he's just completely lost at the plate with his confidence. But something's not right because he just looked bad in the batter's box.
Yeah, I just think he's lost his confidence. I mean, they were. It's not good sometimes. These guys come up and hit a lot of home runs their first couple seasons because it just changes their swing. And I think with him getting switched to shortstop when he's not a natural shortstop. I mean, he's more like if you want to give a guy a rest, maybe he plays there once every week or so, but an everyday shortstop, it's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, and the Yankees, if they even consider upgrading at short, it's almost like you might have to trade Torres unless you want to get rid of Luke Voigt or Gio Urshela, because you would have to move him to second, and then you would have to move LeMahieu to either first or third. So it's sort of like the Yankees got a big decision to make after this season when it comes to Torres and shortstop.
Yeah, I don't think Torres will play shortstop. I think he's too young to give up on him. I mean, he's only 24 years old. But if the Yankees are going to make any moves at the deadline, I mean, if the guys you might consider moving is Voigt or maybe Chapman or Britton or Gio, because if you want to get some quality players, you're going to have to give up some quality.
Yeah, and I guess the Yankees are adamant that they won't go over the threshold. And if you want to add a quality bat, you might have to trade someone like Chapman, who's making $18 million a year, or Britton, who's making $15 million a year, because Yankees got both Voigt and Urshela cheap, and so they're not making a lot of money. And if they were to take on a big contract, they would have to find a way to move some money.
Yeah, well, that's another thing with like Sanchez and Torres and Judge and even Andujar. These guys aren't making much money.
No.
And so now there's got to be decisions, what are you going to do? And I mean, Frazier struggled so bad, so even if you want to trade him, what are you going to get for him?
Low. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with Andujar. So if you wanted to trade for, a good young player, you might have to give up, Andujar, Frazier, and you might have to overpay to get a good young player.
Especially if the rest of the league, senses the Yankees are desperate, they'll no doubt try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, Robert, like we keep saying, it was a poorly constructed team. I mean, look at the outfield. Judge is always hurt. He gets hurt a lot. Stanton can't play the outfield. Hicks is always hurt. You had Gardy there. You had Talkman, and I thought Frazier was going to be a really good player, but now I mean you go into a big series, and you got Andujar who's converting from the infield, and you got Brett Gardner in center, and he's he's a fourth outfielder at best. I mean it's just the games are hard to watch. Yeah,
I mean. Gardner, he can track down a ball, but he's got no arm, and you got him in center field, and it's hard to watch. And with Gary Sanchez, he's a free agent after this year. Do you really want to give Sanchez a nice contract, a big contract? I don't think I would.
No, I don't think the Yankees. I mean, if they want to give him a couple years, but I don't see him giving him a long-term contract.
Yeah, because I think he's making $10 million this year, and I think to keep him will probably cost you somewhere around $15 million a year, I would think, unless you'll take a team-friendly, discount.
Yeah, and I mean, he's played better lately, but
yeah.
I mean, even if he comes to free agent, how much are teams going to pay for it?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always a sucker out there. You never know.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and another guy, I mean, you got Cole, who's making almost $40 million a year, and then you got Stanton, who's making $24 million a year because Miami's picking up the other 10. But those two guys right there are a nice chunk of the salary. And with Judge becoming a free agent soon, you got Sanchez this year, and then you'll eventually with Torres. They got a lot of decisions to make because this roster, you're right, it's poorly constructed. Yeah,
I mean, you got too many one-dimensional players. I mean, if you're not going to play Stanton at all in the outfield, and he's got I don't know, he's got maybe another 4 or 5 years, he's your DH.
Yeah, $24 million DH.
Yeah, and what are you going to do with, Voit? And, you don't have any other options.
Yeah.
Stanton's not going to play the outfield, so he's your DH.
Yeah, and like tonight, their first 8 hitters in the lineup are all right-handed hitters. Gardner's the only left-handed bat in the lineup, batting ninth. And, I mean, it's just there's no wiggle room in the lineup. I mean, you bring in right-handers from the bullpen all night and shut down the Yankees. There's no one in the lineup to break it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think like teams like the Rays have done, the Red Sox. They get pitchers who know, Major League Baseball knows they're all, they're all righties. They're all righties, and you can just bring in these guys, and they could go through the lineup once or twice, and it's just, you can't. There's matchup problems. Yeah,
and the Yankees pitching, who's done a good job keeping them in games, is starting to show cracks. I mean, Gerrit Cole, the first 8 games of the year, he had the second best ERA in baseball, and the last 8 starts, he has the 10th worst ERA in baseball. And since Major League Baseball announced they're going to crack down on, sticky substances in June, beginning of June, his spin rate has drastically decreased. And in those 5 games, he's 2-2 with an ERA of over 4.5. And I mean, it'd be a big blow to the Yankees if he turns out to be just an average pitcher with that kind of a contract. It really handicapped him going forward. He just paid a contract to someone who throws hard, but in the end, is an average pitcher.
Well, I mean, the thing, he got knocked around Boston, so but he's usually consistent. But another thing that when he starts, even when he pitches well and they take him out of the game, they can't hold a lead. I think he's 8-8 or 8-9 with him starting. I mean, they just don't win when he's on the mound.
No, and you're right that the start before Boston, I think he pitched 6 innings, and he left the game with the score tied 2-2, and the Yankees wind up losing the game, I think 3-2 or 4-2. So they can't. He seems to keep them in the game, but the Yankees have trouble scoring runs. And
I mean, the thing is, Cole was brought in like Gleyber, and they were brought in to help you win the World Series.
Yeah.
So are you going to pay this guy all this money, to battle for the second playoff spot? And then if you're rebuilding, I mean, do you really need an ace like Cole?
Yeah. I mean, and this year I thought Jordan Montgomery would take that step. After pitching last year, this is his first full season being healthy, and he's 3-2 with the 4.06 ERA. But I thought he would give him more length and more innings than he has.
Yeah, I think the concern, he come back from the Tommy John, and last year's season, we keep saying was so short. And guys, they pitched 45 innings last year. And, when you get to 80, 100 innings, I mean, how many more innings are you going to be able to pitch?
Yeah. And Domingo Herman, his last several starts hasn't looked good. He's gotten roughed up his last few starts, and Kalen, he's been a disappointment. He had a good start his last outing, but otherwise he's struggled this year. And, I mean, it's been really their bullpen and Cole that's really, done a really good job. I mean, Loaiza, he's been great out of the bullpen, 7-3. I mean, he's been excellent. And so's that guy, the lefty, Lucas Ludic. He's been good, too, coming out of the pen.
Yeah, but they've had a couple, lately the bullpen's had a couple hiccups.
Yeah.
They lost a couple games in the ninth inning, and they lost a couple games. They could possibly have 3 or 4 more wins. I mean, they can't be perfect. They can't win all the time. But, I mean, when you're, like, just around 500, I mean, a couple games can be the difference between 6, 8, 10 games over 500 and just being at the 500 mark. And, there's not a lot of room for error anymore.
No. And I'm got yes on right now. Gleyber Torres in his last 30 games is batting 179. And he's averaging a home run once per every 64 at bats. So, and he's really, since last year and this year, he just doesn't look like the same player he was when he first came up.
No, I mean, I believe, last year when they came back the second time for the 60-game season, they said he might have been a little out of shape, and he just looks like a completely different player. I mean, the first couple of years with the Yankees, he looked like a future star.
Yeah.
And, now it's like, like I say, I wouldn't give up on him because he's still young, but,
yeah,
he's really, he's went down, he's went backwards. He went from a future star player to now, to now an average player, if even that.
And David Cohn last night, he talked, last year and this year they played over 130 games and they're barely above 500. And he basically said that this is what they are. It's an average team, a slightly above average team.
Yeah, well, we've been mentioning for last month, Robert. I mean, they started off last year 9-1.
Yeah.
And, they were maybe 14, 15-5 after 20 games last year. So you figure, over the last 120, 130 games, they're a 500 team. This is not just, a little slump.
No. And they got 3 more games with the Angels, and then they got the Mets coming in Friday. And then they head out west to Seattle. I mean, if they go into the weekend losing 3 out of 4 to the Angels and they wind up, losing the series to the Mets, I mean, the fans up here are going to go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, Robert, when you turn the games on now, I mean, this has been going on since the new stadium, there's nobody sitting there.
No.
There's nobody in the stands.
Yeah, and like the new stadium, it's beautiful. I mean, nice restaurants and all that, but it's not like the old stadium. There was a picture that I have from the top, from the sky, and the old Yankee Stadium, the fans were like right on top of the field, and this new stadium, the fans go backwards, outwards. They're not right on the field like they used to be, and it looks bad for TV, and I think it hurts the overall atmosphere at Yankee Stadium.
Because I know, Robert, I went to the old stadium before it was remodeled, and then after they remodeled it after the 74, 75 season, and when you didn't mind sitting in the upper deck because you were close to you were like hanging over.
Yeah,
like you were saying. I mean, now you turn on these games, and the Yankees have won 3 games in a row, and and there's nobody sitting in the stands.
No. It's like they built this new stadium with business people in mind, not the fans. I remember walking in on the third base side, coming through the tunnel, and you look out to right field, and it literally looked like a wall of seats out in right field, like just going straight up in the air, like a wall of seats. And now they go back. I wish they would have incorporated what they did with the old stadium, where the fans were literally looking down on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, Robert, as time passes, all the stadiums are getting smaller. I think they would get rid of a lot of seats if they could add more luxury boxes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you're going to see like 50, 60,000. You're not going to see that anymore, 1,000-seat stadiums. And I think when they build them again, you're going to have 30,000 seats. Because if they can put luxury boxes and get rid of, the fans sitting in the outfield, the diehard fans, they'll do it.
Yeah.
Because now they're just catering to the upper class who don't really love the game. They just go there to eat, eat crabs and drink wine and, maybe we'll take a peek and see if Jeter's batting,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and they'll show up in the important games and at the end of the season if we're in a playoff run. Nowadays to go to a game, it costs you an arm and a leg just to attend.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, even down here in spring training and, one of the reasons I moved to Florida is to go watch the Yankees, the minor leagues, the minor league camp, and the spring training. I mean, it sucks compared to the way it used to be. It used to be great. And now it just sucks. It's grabbing, and it's just all corporate, and it's really shit. I mean, the game is hard to watch anymore. It's just
it is. I mean, even last night, I tried to watch the game, but I found myself turning it off. It's hard to watch. I mean, Yankees last night, they went 0 for 4 at runners in scoring position, and they went 0 for 3 in the first inning. So they only had one runner in scoring position the rest of the game. It's just hard to watch. I mean, the game's just different, and it's brutal to watch, and it's turning off a lot of old school fans. And I don't think they're really drawing that many new fans to the game. I don't really think the younger fans are that crazy about baseball like they are with the NBA or the NFL.
No, because, if in the old days, any sport, the team wasn't playing good, you let the owners know because the fans were passive. They'd be booing or they just wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
But now, if you're selling these corporate boxes and the people are going anyway, it's more like an event. It's like the game is an afterthought. It used to be, fans would go and they would boo, and instead of maybe getting 35,000 fans, 40,000 fans a game, you might get 25,000. So you were letting the owners know we're not going to put up with this. Of course, with George, he wouldn't put up with this. So
no. Yeah. George right now would be screaming at Major League Baseball. He'd be talking to every reporter he could get his hands on, complaining.
I mean, George might he might panic and make stupid moves, but at least, and he made some. I mean, he overall he did an outstanding job. I mean, but there was periods there where Jay Buhner for Kenny Phelps and Willie McGee for Bob Sykes, and there was Steve Trout. It was numerous. So.
I still love that press conference when they introduced Billy Martin as their manager yet again, and him and Billy got into it, and he was like, "Billy, you're fired." And Billy's like, "I quit." I love that relationship between George and Billy Martin. Even though they always got in arguments and he fired Billy, he always brought him back. Yeah,
and if Billy didn't get killed in the automobile, the truck accident in Christmas of '89, he would have been manager again.
Yeah. I wonder, what Hanks, or I think Hal Steinbrenner, I wonder, you don't hear that much from him. And I just wonder what he's been saying to Brian Cashman, because Cashman today said, it's ugly right now, he even said, if we sink like a stone, they could be sellers at the trade deadline, but he wouldn't give a threshold of what it meant to sink like a stone. So depending how the Yankees play, I think it might determine what they do at the deadline. They might end up making no moves, because it might be too steep to get anyone. It might cost them too much.
Yeah, my feeling is, right, if they stay like, 3 or 4 games over 500, and they're like within, 5, 6, 7 games of the second wild card, they'll just stand pat. But I think maybe the best thing for the franchise is to just lose 10 out of 12 games, because you look at the Red Sox when they've won these World Series, the last 15, 20, 18 years. A lot of times, a year or two before, they lost 95 games. So they went backwards, to get better. The Yankees just haven't had a losing season since '92. I mean, the worst season, they won 84 games, which is an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah. And it's like this year, I think the hype was so high, and it was championship. This team's a championship team, and I just probably looking back on it, it wasn't realistic. I mean, we were talking off air about giving our mid-season grades for the Yankees. I would have to give them a C-, just an average team.
Yeah, I mean, who's really played well? Judge has done well. The starters, Gio's done well, and everybody else is just, they've really struggled. I mean, there's really nobody who's just stepped in. I mean, Gio's played the way you expected him to play in Judge, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's been Judge and Urshela have been the most consistent, and Stanton, when he's healthy, he can go on a run at any time. But, I mean, a lot of guys took a step back. I mean, LeMahieu's struggling this year, Torres struggling, Andujar, Frazier, and Gardner wasn't even supposed to be a starter this year. It's just a lot of guys are struggling, and when you're hitting 200 runners in scoring position for the season, that's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt any team.
Yeah. I forgot that, Robert. You're right. Stanton has played. He's been productive. He'll knock in runs when he stays healthy. But look, LeMahieu has hit well lately, but he's like 274. Yeah. And I mean, you can't go in the big series when you have, you got a makeshift outfield. Yeah. With Andujar and Gardner and Torres and Sanchez, a lot of these guys have just declined a lot. I mean,
and Andujar, he just misplayed a ball in the outfield, which led to a 2-out double, but the Yankees got out of it. But even though Andujar is a really good athlete, he's made mistakes out there in the outfield. I mean, we got a right-handed lineup with players playing out of position on defense.
Yeah, I mean, when you put guys out of position, that's a move you do every once in a while to give somebody a rest. But if they're out there all the time because they haven't played a position before, they're going to have trouble on balls. Yeah. By the wall, they're going to struggle, and when they have to run in, they have to call off the infielder, or there's no continuity between the center fielder and the left fielder, the right fielder. And that's when you have mistakes, and that's what's going to happen when you got guys who aren't used to playing that position. Yeah,
and tomorrow Yankees have Herman pitching, and the Angels got Ohtani on the mound tomorrow. I mean, that guy Ohtani, he's turned out to be a heck of a player.
Yeah, he's one of the guys who's fun to watch. It's like He's an outstanding pitcher. He hits with power. I mean, he's really one of the guys they could build, the face of the game. Him and Trout on the same team, and they're still under 500. But Trout can hurt a lot. But Ohtani's a fun guy to watch.
Oh yeah, and the Yankees just showed their lineup tonight. But there's a stat there: Gleyber Torres in his last 14 games is batting .078. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's
and Cashman said today it's Boone. It's not Boone's fault, or it's not the coaching's fault for the way the team's performing. And I kind of agree with that, but at the same time, I wish Boone would be a little bit more harder on the team, call out some of these players. Just a little bit more tougher. than he has been. I mean, I wish he would add that element to his personality.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to do anything with Boone because if they fire him, it looks like the whole analytics staff has failed. You know, everything the Yankees have built this team on from the ground floor up has just, went backwards. So if they fire Boone, it's like they're making him a scapegoat. But they're admitting, what we wanted to do was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and people have been up here in New York calling the talk shows wanting Boone to be fired, but Boone, it's not Boone's fault. Boone is told who's going to play, and what pitchers he's allowed to use that day. Boone doesn't really have much authority other than being the guy in the dugout the camera pans on. I mean, he's not the one making out the order or deciding who he's going to use out of the pen that night. Those decisions are made for him. And you're right, if the Yankees were to fire him, it'd be hypocrisy, hypocritical of them. And it would look bad.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is follow this team, say, over the last 10 or 12 days. They sweep the Jays. They play against Kansas City. They look like they're ready to turn it around. And then they go into Boston, and they leave 57, 58 men on base. And it's just this is what they are.
Yeah.
This is what they are.
And the All-Star break is July? The All-Star game is, I think, July 13th on a Tuesday in Denver.
Yep.
So the Yankees got another week or two and another couple of weeks before the All-Star break. And like I was saying, they got 3 with the Angels, then 3 with the Mets, and then 3 against Seattle, and then 3 against Houston. So they got a little bit of a tough stretch ahead of them. I know the Mets aren't hitting well right now, but they're in first place. Seattle, you never know what you're going to get with them, and Houston's a good team. I mean, the Yankees could go into All-Star break below 500 if they don't start winning some series. Yeah,
it's a good possibility, and if that happens, then you're going to consider. I mean, bring up this Amber D from the minors and this Kid Park from the minors. Amber D's an outfielder. Amberger, he's an outfielder, and Park's a second baseman, and they're both hitting over 350. So I mean, it might be time to give these kids a chance because you get tired of watching the lineup like 5 through 9 and hardly have anybody over 200. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, like Sanchez, he basically lost his job to Higgy earlier in the year, and it almost seemed like that snapped him out of whatever funk he had been in because he's been hitting well since then. You wonder if you could do something similar with like a Torres or someone else. Put a little fear into these guys that they might lose their job or they're might sit more than they're used to, or something to get these guys to light a fire under their ass.
Yeah, because I don't think, next year you're not going to go into the season with Torres playing shortstop.
No, I mean, and there are going to be shortstops available like Story from Colorado and Corey Seager, the left-handed hitter from the Dodgers. He'll be a free agent as well. I mean, there's some big names out there that have, a known commodity that they could go after. Sanchez just hit a solo home run.
Oh, well, he's okay. Everything I said about him is wrong.
Well, that's funny you should say that because on like Facebook and the internet fans a lot of these fans say, all you Yankee fans who were bashing Sanchez the last year, what do you got to say for yourself now? And it's like, well, he sucked for the last several years. It's nothing wrong with saying the guy sucked for the last several years. He's finally, hitting well now, but, it's all right to say that he hadn't played well the last few years.
No, he hasn't. At all. But he's revived his career with what he's done.
Yeah. Yeah, he just hit a opposite field home run on a fastball out and away. So, I mean, he's doing a better job of hitting the fastballs that are middle of the plate down. Oh, he actually caught a hanging breaking ball. Okay, but he has been hitting the fastballs better.
Well, one of the things he's done since he's hitting better, he's used the whole field.
Yeah.
And Torres, when he was hitting well, he was using the whole field. So
Yeah. Yeah, I know Cashman said, it's not the coaching staff's fault, but I wonder if there's don't make the playoffs, if there might be changes to the coaching staff itself, not Boone, but maybe the hitting coach or something.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to make some moves because, and then, if you want some of these free agents to come to the Yankees, you have to have guys on the roster that think you're going to contend. Like Seager's not going to come to the Dodgers. I mean, from the Dodgers to the Yankees if they're going backwards. He's not going to work, his career on battling for the second wild card.
Yeah, and plus, LA's got a great team, and the weather's always nice out there. So, if they're going to give him the money, he ain't going anywhere.
No.
But there's guys like Chris Bryant at third baseman for the Cubs who more than likely will be available. You got, Trevor Story from Colorado, who shortstop will be a free agent. There's guys out there, that next year that they could bring in if they're willing to pay for them.
Well, the thing is, I just hope they go after, good young players. Doesn't have to be the big name players because New York and all the sports, you always they get these aging superstars after they're past their prime. It'd be nice to just get guys who are just good players. They can field, they hit 280, they hit 15 homers, 75, and, they steal a base once in a while, and they're just good, sound, fundamental players. Instead of guys who are, going to hit 40, 50 home runs, but if they don't hit homers, they don't do anything else. Yeah,
and I'd like to see them, get a couple of left-handed hitters for this roster, either at the deadline or during the off season. They gotta mix up this lineup a little bit.
Yeah, you have to have a couple more bats. You have to have some lefty bats in there.
And Severino, I guess they're saying he could be ready to go in about 4 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you really don't know what to say about him because he's been hurt so much, and
and I don't think they could use him as a starter. I think they would rather, use him as a pen or maybe use him as an opener or something like that. Give him a couple innings because, like you said, he hasn't pitched in a few years, and you don't want to, throw him out there and have him full go.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the team from 2017 when they missed the series by one game, and it looks like they were coming on, and a lot of these guys have just went, because of injuries, because of bad play. It's just like, you expected a World Series or two, or at least an appearance, and it's just, everybody's went bad all at once.
Yeah, and you got to figure the Astros cheating like they did. If they weren't cheating, do we beat them in 2017? And does Altuve hit that home run off of Chapman? Yeah, man, because he knew that ball. He knew it was coming. And when he came home to home plate that game, grabbing his shirt, yelling to his teammates, "Don't rip the shirt," So I mean, did the Yankees get to the World Series if the Astros weren't cheating?
Yeah, good possibility because I think the Yankees were in those two series were 1-5 or 1-6 in Houston.
Yeah,
they couldn't win in Houston. So
and you got to wonder if that was their window, and if that team's window is now closed.
Yeah, because it looked like they were going to, after that year, they were going to be good for the next 5 or 6 years, and this year has been a big disappointment. It's almost like 1965 all over again.
I got lucky. I mean, in my late teens, early 20s, in the mid 90s, I got to watch him win the World Series 4 or 5 years. I mean, I do remember the 80s as a kid. We scored a lot of runs, but we never made it to the postseason except for the early 80s. Man, that was a rough time for me as a fan, But otherwise, the Yankees have been a good team. They just haven't they've only won one World Series in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to, the only rough stretch they've had is 89 through 92, and then 82 they were under 500. But I think since 74, 75, they've maybe had 5 losing seasons. So it's been an incredible run.
Yeah. Andujar just booted a ball in left field, allowing a leadoff double. He's had 2 plays in back-to-back innings now where he's messed up and out in the left field. Yeah, Yankees, they have to find themselves an outfielder.
Yeah. I mean, you can't keep, going on like this. I just hope Andujar keeps the hitting, which I think he will because he's a good hitter. And, maybe he'll have some trade value in the off season because I don't know what you're going to do with Frazier because he just looks lost. And, I mean, what are you going to get for him if you try to trade him? I think it'd be just better if those 2 guys got out of New York. Would help their careers.
So do I. I think the Yankees playing yo-yo with Frazier hurt him more than it helped him. And I think a fresh start somewhere else would be great for him. And same with Andujar, a place where they can play, every day and not have the pressure of playing on a team that's expected to win. Yeah.
Well, we'll see in the coming months in the off season if they don't go on strike. So
it's a lot of people aren't talking about that, but there could be a strike after the season. It could be that.
Yeah, well, everything out sucks. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went on a strike. And one of the things is guys like Frazier get buried in the minor leagues, and guys like Andujar get buried. And there's a lot of guys. Teams have their they can own these players for 5 or 6 years, and they have no chance to get in the big leagues because of the big league roster, and they're losing their careers. Wasting the minor leagues.
Yeah, someone was saying yesterday, I forget who it was, but they signed to a minor league deal, and it's usually for 4 or 5 years, and then they got team control, with arbitration for another 4 or 5 years. I mean, they're holding on to these players for 12 years, and by the time they're able to really go out in the free market, they're in the, middle of their prime or their prime's about over. And, that's something that might have to change.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Robert, I should mention, when Gary Denbo was running the minor league system down here, he was doing a fantastic job. He was Jeter's manager in the minor leagues, and he went to the Marlins with Jeter now, and the Yankees really miss him. But I think one of the things, if you look back over the last 20 years, I mean, you get to the Yankees, you get to AAA, and they'll sign, ex-major league pitchers and ex-hitters to go to AAA. And no matter how these young kids do, I mean, you can look at their roster now. They got this guy, Dietrich, and they brought somebody up. The guy only played a couple games, but, they're ex-major league outfielders or ex-major league players, and they're always going to get priority over guys who are hitting 350 in the minors. I don't care if they're hitting 150 in the minor leagues. If they were in the big leagues, that's the guys they're going to bring up, and the same thing with the pitchers. Yeah.
Yankees, Taylor just gave up a 2-run homer. Angels took the lead 2-1. This could be a long game.
Yeah. Well, I'll do my best not to watch it.
Yeah. But next week, let's see, Monday, the Yankees have off. Next show due Monday after the Mets series. And
yeah, sure. It's always nice to talk baseball, even though it's not as much fun as it usually is, but it's still a great game.
I tell you, all the phone calls to the radio stations, it's about how awful it is to watch, how hard it is to watch, and them wanting Boone fired and Gleyber sent to the minors. Those are the 3 big things. They want Boone fired, Gleyber sent to the minors, and just how hard and awful it is to watch the Yankees play.
Well, I mean, one of the things, Robert, as Yankee fans, we're spoiled.
Yeah.
I mean, usually we start bitching about the team when they get in the playoffs and they strike out 15 times and leave 18 men on base in games, in the playoffs. But, this year we're not even going to have that. I mean, they've been so good for so long that, something like this. We haven't seen something like. Well, we did have a few year period where they won like 84, 85, 87 games, like maybe 8 years ago. But for the most part, I mean, they've always been good, and this is something different.
Yeah, I mean, before the season started, the Yankees were supposed to be runaway winners of this division, with the Rays behind them.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.